It is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. So said J.K. Rowling to the graduating class of 2008 at Harvard. I think this advice is applicable to every one of us at all stages of our lives. I wear 3 hats professionally. First hat, professor and academic. Second hat, I'm a leadership coach and trainer. And third hat, I'm a philosopher and humanitarian. But across the body of my work, one thing that I find common with everyone I interact with, whether as a coachee or a client or a student, is our fear of failure. I've been a faculty at IIM Bangalore for the last 10 years, and because of that, bulk of the participants that I interact with are from premier educational institutes or work in blue chip corporate companies. And ironically, what I've found is that the more successful their past track record, the more crippling their fear of failure. In fact, when I first introduced this topic on fear of failure to MBA students, what always happens is that I receive so much of a pushback from the students, arguing and claiming and insisting that it is their fear of failure that has brought them the achievements and brought them where they are today. It takes a lot of debating and a lot of reflection and questioning and introspection to start even coming to appreciate the possibility that although the fear of failure, while it can be something that raises us to action, is not necessarily the best or only form of motivation that exists. So why is fear of failure a limitation? And why do I say it is not the best form of motivation that exists? For this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the way our brain is structured. So when we are under the influence of any kind of fear, including the fear of failure, the part of our brain that's in the driving seat, the part of the brain that controls our thinking and decision making, is really a very primitive part of the brain. It is not our evolved neocortex. So the decisions and the thoughts that we have access to through our brains when we are afraid are not our best thoughts, and they are not definitely our wisest decisions. So frankly, the fear of failure sabotages us in the task that you're doing, whether it's an exam or whether it's a presentation or a business decision. But there's another way that fear of failure sabotages us as well. And this is even more interesting because this is what happens in life, where it's not an exam, there isn't a syllabus, but where you need to venture into new and unknown territories, you want to innovate, you want to do something different. And this is where the fear of failure actually, even without our realizing it, it holds us back. Because what our brain is telling us is danger, danger. If you go there, you could fail. And you know what? We've actually been conditioned to avoid failure at any cost, which means we avoid even trying out those tasks which actually have a chance of failure associated with them. So let's take a closer look at this demon called fear of failure and understand how it builds up and how we can overcome it. The first thing to acknowledge about fear of failure is that it's completely man-made. It does not exist in nature. Do babies have any fear of failure? Look at a toddler learning to walk. The toddler is crawling and then she tries to stand up, falls, tries again, falls. You never see the toddler say, oh no, I failed. Failure 1, failure 2, oh no, I'm such a failure. No. So the toddler does not even have the concept of failure in his or her head. For him, it's just an experience. It's just feedback. Oh, it didn't work out this way. Let's try this way. Let's do it again. And that is what it is for you too. And that is how it was when you were a baby, when you were a child. So where and when did we really start having even a concept of something called failure? It probably started for most of us in school where, you know, there was a certain cutoff marks and we were said, okay, you pass, you fail, and you know, this is success, this is failure. And that's fine because yes, the schooling system had its need and logic, but the thing is, our brains bought into these notions at a later point in time, and therefore this is called conditioning. It's not natural, which means it doesn't have to be there, and because it is conditioning, we can actually uncondition ourselves from this. So there are 4 approaches that I'm going to suggest to you, and which you can practice to uncondition your brain from this construct, this kind of mental model of success and failure that it has bought into. And if you can't uncondition your brain completely, you can at least loosen the grip that this construct has on it. And I'm going to give you 4 approaches. You don't have to use all 4, but you can use any one that you most resonate with. So the first approach stems from the world of business, from design thinking. And this is to adopt a prototyping mindset with everything. So what is prototyping? In design thinking, prototyping is when you create a product or a service or an offering. You create something and you don't expect right away that what you're creating has to be best or it has to go out that way. You actually get feedback from customers, from the users, from anyone you want, and you tweak it further and you tweak it further and you make it better and you make it better. And that's the whole idea of a prototype. So what if you could use this prototyping approach to everything that you do? Even yourself, even your own career, your own achievements, your own personal development. What if you're always prototypes, right? And we're just getting better and better and better. Where is success and failure there? It's just a journey towards betterment. Approach number 2. And this one stems from academic research, from positive psychology to be more precise. And this is to actually take a different perspective. And in this case, it is to take your older self's perspective. So I'll give you a little bit on data here, information on the research that has been done on the topic of regret. And this is research that is done with very old people in their 70s. And typically when they're interviewed and they're asked about the things they regret, turns out, and so there are 3 categories of activities, right? One where people tried something out and it worked out the way they wanted, which is called success. Or category 2, you try something out, it didn't work out the way you expected it to or wanted it to, and we call that failure. And 3, you're so afraid you don't try it at all. So people in their 70s express the most amount of regret for category 3. Of course, category 1, there's no question of regret, but it was not category 2 that caused them regret, but category 3. So if you were to take your own older self's perspective and say, you know what, when I am 70 and in a rocking chair and I'm thinking back about my life, do I want to feel regret about all the things I could have tried and I didn't? Or do I want to actually have the information that, I tried a whole bunch of things and some of them worked out and some of them didn't? So that's approach 2. Let's look at approach 3. This is a very simple but powerful refocusing technique, which is actually been passed down generations, and it's part of the cultural philosophy in many countries as well. And you would have heard this often. It's called investing in the journey or the process. I'm going to give you a mountain climbing example, okay? Imagine 2 scenarios in which I'm climbing a mountain. Scenario 1, I can clearly see this is the peak of the mountain, that's my destination, that's where I need to go, and I'm climbing. And in my head, the equation I'm using is that when I reach that peak and destination, that's success for me, and then I'll be happy, and then I've made it. And then I'll say, good girl, good job, Ramya. Scenario number 2, again, I'm climbing a mountain, that's the destination, that's the peak, and I have my eyes set on it, but as I'm climbing, I do stop once in a while, and I also look back and say, wow, I've come this far, good job. So I'm acknowledging myself for the journey, for the progress. And as I'm climbing the mountain, I look around, I take pictures, I look at the birds, the butterflies, I make friends with my co-travelers. I learn about the mountain, the environment, the people I'm walking with. So I'm investing in the journey. Now, in both cases, there is a chance that we might never reach the peak. anything could happen, right? We might have to abandon the journey or the expedition. And in both cases, it's a failure because that was the original task, right? That was the original thing that we set out to do. But in which case do you think the failure is going to be more devastating? In case A, because all the eggs are only when I reach there am I going to be successful. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. In case B, well, I didn't reach there. I might still feel bad, but then I've learned so many things. I've had a good time. I've developed as a person, and the journey was not bad as well. So as you're climbing the mountain, think of the fear of failure. In which case is the fear of failure going to be more? It's going to be more here, because in this case, in both cases you can fail. But in this case, if you fail, you've lost everything, and therefore your fear is more. Approach number 4. And this is my favorite, and this has its roots in the Buddhist tradition, but it's also just, common sense. It's to approach a paradigm of non-judgment. So what is non-judgment? Non-judgment is not labeling things as good and bad, because we can never truly know if they're good or bad. And I'm going to give you a short story here to remember this, because it's a very powerful story and it works for me and it works for most of my students and clients. So this story is called Good Thing, Bad Thing, Who Knows? There was a farmer once who lived on the edge of the forest, and one day his favorite horse ran away into the forest. The neighbors came and they were all expressing condolences. Oh no, this is such a bad thing, your horse ran away. The farmer only said, my horse ran away, that is true. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? After a couple of weeks, that horse came back with 3 more horses. It was a wonderful extrovertish horse. And the farmer now had 4 horses. And the neighbors came back and said, celebration, this is amazing. Oh, this is so nice. And the farmer only said again, my horse has come back with 3 horses, that is true. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? The neighbors were puzzled, what's going on? But, time went on, and the farmer had an 18-year-old son who used to help him on the farm. Wild horses need to be broken. When he was trying to tame one of these horses, she kicked him, he fell down, had a fracture, bedridden. Neighbors came back, oh no, it was such a curse and we're so sorry and such a misfortune. And the farmer only said, my son got hurt, that is true. He is in pain, that's true. He has a broken leg. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? And the neighbors were like, what's going on here? Like, the boy is in pain, but time went on. 2 more weeks pass and war breaks out in the kingdom, and it's that kind of a war where the king says, you know what? We want all the young men into our army, even though they knew they're going to lose the war. So everyone's recruited into the army except one young man who is got a fracture. And at the end of the war, none of the other boys and men came back, but this man had a fracture, this boy, and he recovers. And the neighbors came back and said, wow, you had your son. That's so amazing. We don't. And the man said, I have my son, that is true. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? And time goes on, right? So the crux of this story, which is really very powerful for me, is that we never know enough. Our brains never know enough about the situation or about what's going to happen next. We don't have the complete story, the complete picture about how things will unfold to know what is truly good or bad for us. So in the context of success and failure, and many of you might resonate with this, sometimes you wanted something. It could be a job, it could be a promotion, it could be a certain achievement, a certain partner, and you didn't get it, and you thought of it as a failure. But in hindsight, new openings and possibilities opened up, and you were like, wow, I'm so grateful that that happened, because now my life has taken on this completely different trajectory. In that case, is that failure really a failure, or was it just a turning point? So this is really approach number 4, where you decide to not judge your outcomes as good or bad. And therefore, you can still call it failure, which means you wanted something and it didn't turn out that way. But don't have to really stick in that failure with, this is a bad and horrible thing that happened to me, because who knows? So you can use any one of these 4 approaches: the practical approach of seeing everything as a prototype, the academic approach of taking your own older self's perspective, the commonsensical approach of investing in the journey, the process, or the philosophical approach of non-judgment, good thing, bad thing, who knows. Before I end this talk, I'm also going to mention three inherent qualities that you can tap into, and these are qualities that are there in all of us, but you can tap into them consciously and they become great ways to overcome fear of failure. So what are these qualities? These are courage, playfulness, and kindness. Why courage? No matter how much reframing and how much work you do, for most of us, at least that's been my experience, the fear of failure will come up every now and then, and you'll experience the fear. And that's when, instead of just hoping and wishing that the fear just magically goes off, whatever your level of fear, learn to dance with it, work with it, and use your courage to just push through it if you need to. That's where you tap into your courage and say, fear, you know what, you can be there, but you're not getting the better of me in this instance. I'm still going to go ahead and do it despite the fear. Second quality, playfulness. Again, everyone had it, you have it. And how does playfulness help? You know, look at a child playing, or think of yourself playing. When you're playing a game, you win, you lose. You're not expecting to always win, 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 win. But the loss is not something that is as heavy as the way we look at failure when it comes to profession and work and the other things that we make very significant in our life. So really, playfulness is there in you and you can tap into it, your inherent quality of looking at wins and losses and things working out and not working out and just saying, yeah, this is the game. It's all part of the game. Third quality, kindness. Now this might seem like an almost unusual quality in this context, but let me explain. So there's a part of every one of us that is hardwired into being kindness and caring. Believe me, there's research to support this, okay? Of course, many of us might be conditioned out of it, but it is still there within you. So when you tap into this universal frequency of kindness, you know, the kindness that you see that sometimes comes out in calamities and floods and where you're just like, I'm just going to help everyone and be nice to everyone. And you can burn that flame of kindness. The more you burn your own flame of kindness, you cannot but see yourself through that same lens of kindness, which means if you goof up, if you make mistakes, if you fail, your heart sees yourself and your mistakes with that same spirit of kindness that it's capable of embodying and seeing events through. Finally, I'm going to leave you with one last simple wordplay almost, but extremely potent, which is, if and when you do fail at things, please remind your brain to conclude it or to interpret it as I failed at task XYZ, not as I am a failure. Because the first one is a conclusion at the level of the task, very context specific, and we're allowed to do that. The second one is where you're sort of telling yourself that I am a failure in my existence and as I am, which is not true, which is definitely not true. So you just are, and you can never be a failure because there is no objective definition of being a success. So please remember that you can never be a failure, but definitely you can fail at context-specific things that you set out to engage and achieve.